Hi, it's Dr. Johnson, and for my field trip, I chose the Bishop Museum in Honolulu, Hawaii. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Bishop Museum, here's a quick 30-second introduction video.
The Bernice Pauahi Bishop Museum, Hawaii's gathering place and educational center for more than a century. Discover our history in Hawaiian Hall. Share our culture with stories and songs. Explore our dynamic world of volcanoes, oceans, and starlit skies. Experience Hawaii, the Pacific, and beyond at Bishop Museum.
I always call the Bishop Museum the Smithsonian of Hawaii because it has such a variety of activities and artifacts to look at, and I just love it. Now, I love the Bishop Museum because this is where we take our traditional LED 380 field trip. I love not only introducing the students in class to how to do field trips and what museums and other sites can offer, but I love having them explore what the Bishop Museum specifically has to offer. So when we go down, we usually do an activity or two as if we were elementary students, and then have some free time to explore the museum, and it's always a great experience. Now, when I first had this idea of, I want to take my college class to the Bishop Museum, of course, I started with their website, and they have a great educational section there. But I noticed at their website, all of their experiences dealt with K12, and that was nice. So I sent an email to their education staff and said, I have this university class, and I want to come do, activities with them so they can learn how to do field trips when they're classroom teachers. And they were very accommodating. In fact, they invited me down to come visit with them in person and talk about different things that we could do as a class. So through a combination of face-to-face contact, the website, and visiting the museum, we're able to structure the field trip for the university class. But what if you want to structure a field trip for K through 12? Well, they have 3 different options. They have what I call the $5, $7, and $9 option. Or if you're doing it during a school break, fall, winter, spring, or summer break, it's a little more expensive. But these are sometimes good options for schools or homeschooling families. Anyway, the $5 option is provides you with one experience for your students, about a 30-minute activity, and you as a classroom teacher have to lead that. They provide you with the activity guide, and they provide you with the space to do that, but as a classroom teacher, you're in charge of that. For only $2 more per student, $7, the education staff at the Bishop Museum will do that experience for you. Plus, they'll do an additional experience. So 2 experiences run by university staff, by museum staff, which frees you up as a teacher to enjoy the experience with your students, maybe do some student management, or just, have fun. The ultimate option is the $9 Superpac, and this is 2 hours in depth with about 4 different activities, all led by the museum staff. So wonderful activities there. And when I said activities, they have a whole list of activities that you as a teacher choose from. You get to decide what activities you want to do with your students. So you can look at the topics. You can also look at the connections with core curriculum and decide which ones you want to do. So here's a list of all their current activities. And with each one of these activities, they give you a little introduction to it about what your students would be doing. But they also have tied these into the social studies standards. So you could go in and say, hey, both of these sports and games and ahupua'a, they would both work with first grade. They have some first grade standards. They have some third grade standards for ahupua'a. There's some fourth grade standards in both of those. So you can kind of see how they would fit with your classroom as well as the Hawaii standards, which are really nice. Now, the Superpac, the $9, they focus on a specific topic. And this is their topic on Voyages Discovery. And this is, just a great bargain because that's 2 hours of really in-depth exploration and really, really a great value. And they also have grants and applications you can make if you have students in economic hardship or ways that you could fund this experience without having the students or the school pay up front, which is kind of nice. Now, speaking of educational programs, before the COVID pandemic, they would have sleepovers available too, where you could bring your class. You could spend an entire evening, sleep out at the museum. Students would sleep on the museum floor, and in the morning they would actually even cook you breakfast. So museums are doing all sorts of fun experiences for classes because they want students to learn to love learning the way that the museum staff love the museum and the things that it has to offer. So at the Bishop Museum, they also have some great online resources. They have an online learning center, and I just clicked on culture, and it shows the different cultural connections. And for each one of these cultural connections, they have links to activities and things you can do with that. They also have a great resource called the Hawaii Alive website, which links to the old standards, the pre-2018 standards, but still very usable. So they have different activities like the Early Hawaiian Society, Origins and Migrations. And when you click on any one of these, it will give you a nice introduction to the topic, as well as links to primary sources that you could use in your classroom to explore this topic more. So that's a great resource from the Bishop Museum. Now, in the Bishop Museum, there are some things you really have to think about as a teacher. One of the biggest things is you're in a museum. They do have required standards of the number of chaperones you have to have. And with kindergarten through second grade, you have to have one adult for every 5 students. And that's specifically to keep the students from maybe damaging some artifacts or putting themselves in danger. The other thing you have to consider when you're at this museum, in addition to classroom management, is maybe some disability skills. The Bishop Museum has some older buildings in it. And while they have ADA accommodations, they have lifts, they have elevators, in an older building that's all been retrofitted, so it could be a little bit more difficult. So you do need to be aware of what problems you might have if you have a student in a wheelchair or other students with disabilities. Now, the great thing about the Bishop Museum is if you plan on a field trip there, they will actually let you come as a teacher for free beforehand so you can explore, look around the museum, and kind of plan and anticipate before you take your students down. And that's a great thing to take advantage of. So I'd encourage you, if you ever get the chance to visit the Bishop Museum, or if you're teaching in Hawaii, take advantage of the educational programs they offer because they are fantastic.